My father stood in the center of the crowded country club ballroom, clinking his champagne glass until 200 wedding guests went completely silent. He wore a triumphant grin, locked eyes with me, and loudly announced that he was still graciously financing my college education. A wave of polite, pitying laughter rippled through the room, while my sister smirked from the head table. They believed they had just publicly humbled me, completely unaware that I had been financially independent for months. When my father confidently thrust the microphone into my hand for a rebuttal, he gave me the exact stage I needed to dismantle their lies. Growing up, my older sister Chloe was the undisputed center of the universe, an absolute golden child who never had to earn a single thing. When she pulled mediocre grades in high school, my parents immediately bought her a luxury SUV and paid for elite private tutors to save her. Meanwhile, I graduated at the very top of my class, receiving nothing more than a quick congratulatory dinner before the conversation shifted back to her. I spent my weekends bagging groceries and working exhausting shifts just to afford basic textbooks. This unfair dynamic taught me early on that my survival depended entirely on my own resilience. By the time I entered college, I had secured enough academic scholarships and paid corporate internships to cover nearly all of my educational expenses. The minor financial assistance my parents occasionally provided always came attached to heavy, manipulative guilt trips about their supposed generosity. Then Chloe got engaged to a wealthy guy named Austin, and my family completely lost their minds. Every single holiday, weekend, and casual dinner was instantly transformed into an extravagant planning session for what felt like a royal event. The entire world was forced to stop and revolve around Chloe's big day. As the wedding drew closer, my parents demanded my absolute presence at every single rehearsal, tasting event, and family gathering. It did not matter that I was drowning in my own heavy academic workload and professional responsibilities. Whenever I politely declined an invitation due to my career, my mother would weep and accuse me of ruining her family. Then, a few weeks before the ceremony, my father called me with an aggressive tone that proved he still thought he owned my life. He wasted no time on pleasantries, immediately launching into a lecture about my lack of family loyalty. My father told me that my selfish attitude was deeply hurting Chloe and breaking my mother's heart. I sat silently at my desk, listening to him ramble about my apparent obligations to a family that never bothered to check on me. Nobody had asked about my goals, my exhausting schedule, or my future in over a year. When he finally delivered his ultimate threat to cut off my tuition payments if I missed another event, I almost laughed out loud. He truly believed he held all the cards, completely blind to the fact that his leverage had vanished. The reality was that I had accelerated my coursework and graduated 6 months prior, immediately landing a high-paying remote role at a booming tech firm. My starting salary, combined with independent consulting contracts, actually placed my income significantly higher than Austin's earnings. I never actively hid this massive achievement from my parents, they simply never bothered to ask a single question about my life. I calmly told my father that I understood his terms, listening to the arrogant satisfaction in his voice as he hung up. He thought he had successfully forced me back into submission. During the final 2 weeks leading up to the celebration, Chloe expanded her demands, insisting that I act as a personal assistant for her guests. I agreed to every single request without a hint of pushback, which visibly shocked my parents and made Chloe feel entirely victorious. They assumed the terrifying threat of losing my college funding had finally broken my spirit and forced me to behave. I willingly let them indulge in that delusion, playing along until I received the official reception schedule. The moment I saw the program, I realized exactly how they planned to humiliate me. The wedding day arrived on a beautiful Saturday afternoon, but the atmosphere inside the country club felt heavy with unspoken tension. My family members were acting strangely confident, wearing smug expressions that suggested they were eagerly anticipating a specific moment. My mother fluttered around the room, loudly ensuring every guest understood the staggering amount of money she had spent on the event. My father gave me a dismissive pat on the shoulder, whispering that he was glad I had finally learned my lesson. I maintained my composure, smiling politely as the ceremony concluded. The true ambush began during the formal dinner reception when my mother took the stage for her heavily anticipated family tribute speech. She began by praising Chloe's grace, intelligence, and beautiful relationship, but the tone quickly shifted into something much more pointed. She spoke at length about the immense financial sacrifices parents make, dropping heavy hints about children who take parental wealth for granted. I kept my expression entirely neutral, knowing this orchestrated performance was specifically designed to set the stage for my father's grand finale. When my father grabbed the microphone, he abandoned all subtlety and began lecturing the room about responsibility and maturity. He painted a vivid picture of struggling, ungrateful younger siblings who desperately need parental guidance and constant financial rescues to survive. Several guests shifted awkwardly in their chairs, turning their heads to look directly at me with heavy expressions of sympathy. He wrapped up his speech by mentioning the heavy tuition burden he was still carrying for me, completely destroying my character in front of 200 people. My father turned toward my table with a patronizing smile, extending the microphone so I could deliver a humiliated public thank you. I walked up to the stage with absolute calm, feeling the intense silence of the room as everyone waited for my response. I started by warmly congratulating Chloe and Austin, wishing them a genuinely beautiful marriage, which made my parents relax. Then, I turned directly toward my father and noted how incredibly fascinating it was to hear so much public anxiety regarding my college tuition. I looked out at the sea of faces and clearly announced that nobody needed to worry because I had actually graduated 6 months ago. My mother's rehearsed smile completely frozen on her face, while my father blinked in absolute shock as the room gasped. I explained that I had finished my degree early through academic scholarships and intense dedication, immediately securing a lucrative career. I kept my tone entirely conversational and pleasant, making it clear that my parents simply had no idea because they were entirely consumed by wedding planning. I casually added that my independent career was going incredibly well, netting me an income that exceeded everyone's expectations for someone my age. The meticulously crafted narrative of the broke, dependent sibling completely dissolved in a matter of seconds, leaving my family in stunned silence. Suddenly, an elderly aunt sitting near the front row raised her hand, asking the one question my parents desperately wished to avoid. She loudly asked if my loving parents had been there to witness my graduation ceremony, causing the entire room to hold its breath. I looked directly at my silent, visibly trembling parents before answering that they unfortunately missed my graduation to tour wedding venues. A heavy, uncomfortable murmur spread through the ballroom as the guests instantly recognized the deep pattern of neglect and favoritism. No further explanation was necessary. The stark contrast between how my sister and I were treated was now on full display. My mother tried to frantically redirect the crowd's attention, but the energy of the evening had permanently shifted in my favor. I politely returned the microphone, calmly walked back to my table to grab my jacket, and quietly exited the venue into the cool night air. Walking across the parking lot, I felt an incredible sense of freedom that I had not experienced in my entire life. I never wanted to ruin my sister's wedding, but I refused to let their lies define my worth any longer. In the months that followed, my career reached new heights, and I finally stopped begging for a family approval that was never going to come.